guys, this is Gabe from Not That Bad coming at you with something new for the channel. We're going to start doing movie reviews, really more movie recommendations. There's a lot of that boomer talk about how there are no good movies anymore, and if you go to the movies or if you just pay attention to new releases, you know that is not the case. And there's really no better proof of that right now than Richard Linklater's new movie, Hitman.
I tried looking you up and nothing. It's like you don't even exist.
I guess I'm just your fantasy.
So what's the biggest difference between the real you and your occupation?
By the way, my name is Gary Johnson, and I'm a fake hitman.
Which just came out on Netflix and received a limited theatrical run. Now, I am not just a huge fan of Richard Linklater, but really an admirer. Basically, anybody who's trying to get into independent filmmaking owes something to Richard Linklater. He was the herald of that 90s independent film movement with Slacker. And ever since then, he's been kind of the trailblazer of what I consider the humanist but comedy forward side of indie filmmaking. Now, I should also be transparent because I actually have my own, history with Richard Linklater, because I was actually an extra on his last movie, Apollo 10.5, also released by Netflix. Now, it's a rotoscoped movie, so you can't really recognize me, but I was there on set a few days, and Richard Linklater, the cool guy that he is, on the first day, he actually shook my hand. Most directors at his level will not acknowledge an extra, let alone like actually shake their hand and thank them for a day of filming. Obviously, that's not a part of the movie review or my thoughts of Richard Linklater as an artist, but it's still really nice to know when you hear all these stories about our favorite writers and directors and actors actually being scumbags. It's just really cool to hear or to see firsthand stories of your personal heroes actually being really good guys. And another person who I saw on set of Apollo 10.5 is the star of Hitman, Glen Powell. Now, I'm happy to say that I was into Glen Powell before it was cool. He obviously had a career as a child actor. He was in Spy Kids 3, and then he was getting cast in smaller roles in big movies like The Dark Knight Rises. So he's been around for a really long time, but I first noticed him and really became a fan when he was in one of Linklater's previous movies, Everybody Wants Some. A very underseen movie that came out right after Boyhood. So I feel like it was a real kind of dessert to the huge entree, the big event that Boyhood was, and it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. It got eclipsed by that. But if you saw it, I think you would walk away knowing that Glen Powell had the makings of a future star. He was just the most immediately charismatic, instantly memorable member of that cast, and I've always had my eye out for him. Even when, you see really promising actors all the time, and sometimes, unfortunately, you don't see much of them in the future. Glen Powell, that's a guy I really hoped would do more stuff, and lo and behold, a few years later, not only do I get to, see him on set in this movie alongside Zachary Levi.
Don't like me, that's okay. I like me. In fact, I love me.
But then right after, he does Top Gun Maverick. He's doing Twisters, the sequel to Twister. He's becoming our next A-lister, our next movie star marquee idol. But the interesting thing about him as a movie star compared to our other stars of this generation, like the Timothée Chalamets, is he doesn't feel old school in every way, but something about him really harkens back to that kind of 60s, 70s era of movie star with guys like Paul Newman and Robert Redford. He just has this swagger, but real down-to-earth charm. I definitely can't think of many other stars of his caliber that could fit so perfectly into this role that he plays in Hitman. So Hitman is loosely based on a real story. It's about a college professor in Louisiana who also moonlights as a fake hitman to entrap these people who are trying to actually hire professional hitmen, and he comes up with all these different personas and these different identities, some really wacky characters to play these fake hitmen and entrap these would-be murderers. But his life gets very complicated when he starts to fall in love with a potential client of his who wants him to take out her ex-husband. And, well, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the plot because it's one of those movies that starts with this simple premise and gets just infinitely more complicated. But instead of being convoluted, it becomes this wonderful comedy of errors that serves as both the best rom-com of the year so far and this Jungian like self-analysis, this interrogation of the self. You know, Glen Powell is playing a meek college professor, although a much more dashing and charismatic college professor than I ever had. I certainly don't know any college professors that had biceps quite like him. He's this bookwormy kind of meek character. He's been divorced. He doesn't really have a lot of excitement in his life except for this opportunity to play all these fictional hitmen. He takes it seriously, not just out of the sense of doing justice for the police, you know, catching these criminals, but also because it gives him the opportunity to explore different sides of his persona and to really explore his psychology. And Glen Powell, man, like, this is his audition tape to be our movie star, the definitive marquee idol of the 2020s, because he plays so many different characters in this one film, and he transitions and weaves his way through all of them within just one scene sometimes. There's a marvelous scene in the third act when all of his lies are starting to unravel, and he has to contain and work with these different characters that he's created, and it's beautiful schizophrenia. In this one movie alone, he reminded me of so many great actors. He reminded me of Jim Carrey. He reminded me of Robert Redford. He reminded me of Tilda Swinton. And the list just goes on and on. And above all else, what Hitman is going to do is, I think, really just cement that not only is Glen Powell this really charismatic actor, not only is he this guy who can fill up the screen and hold his own against people like Tom Cruise, but he is like a bona fide thespian. Like, this guy has Oscar caliber talents. And speaking of talents on screen, you know, he's not the only real star in this movie. He's not the only magnetic performance. The other big standout is his love interest, Adria Arjona. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Now, she's an actress I have seen before. She was in the Max miniseries Irma Vep, the remake of the 90s French film. But yeah, this is like a performance that announces her as, again, not just an actor, but like she's a star in the making. And she has sexual tension and chemistry with Glen Powell that I really didn't think that our infantilized audience of today could really handle the chemistry between them. It's especially coming from Glen Powell's character, who's introduced to us as, you know, a man who doesn't seem to have any passion for romance or the relationships in his life. Just the thrill of seeing him discover this passion for this woman, even though, you know, they met under very dubious circumstances. You know, this woman was introduced to him as somebody who was trying to kill her husband. You know, you really can't blame Glen Powell for going down this rabbit hole with her, because it is clearly the most dynamic element of his life. But another actor that I really need to call attention to in this film, because I frankly think he stole every scene he was in, was Austin Emilio. He's actually the original fake hitman whom Glen Powell replaces because he gets busted for being a dirty cop, and he's trying to get his job back for the rest of the movie. So he's obviously the foil for Glen Powell from the get-go, and he's everything that Glen Powell is not. He's a sleazeball, and he cannot hide it. In fact, he revels in it. Like, this is a guy who, like, I just imagined like an ashtray. Like, he just embodied that gutter trash vibe and embraced it wholeheartedly, and it was honestly always just an amazing joy to see him and Glen Powell played this cat and mouse game. So yeah, this is the best comedy I've seen of the year. It's certainly the best romance or romantic comedy. And while it's probably going to be maybe a little out there for general audiences, that's probably why, you know, it had such a hard time finding distribution. Famously, like, Netflix came in when this movie's future just looked really uncertain. But I would not be surprised if this movie, like many of Linklater's other films, are just a little bit too, I don't know, like more interested in mature themes. It's more interested in that than any crime drama or any of the actual, you know, criminal elements of this story. Like, that's obviously the hook, but this movie is what, you know, Richard Linklater's best movies are about. You know, they're about these finely drawn characters getting to know themselves through their relationship with another person. So as a Linklater fan, as a Glen Powell fan, and as somebody who desperately needs to see any comedies, like, I endorse Hitman wholeheartedly. The fact that I worked with the director once before does not bias that judgment in any way. So yeah, if you have a Netflix account, go check it out. Look it up to see if it's playing in your local theater like it was for me. I did get to see this on the big screen, and I feel pretty grateful about that. I've seen some people kind of sneer at the idea of this being a big release. Somebody called it, you know, in essence, a TV movie. And not to knock TV movies, there have been great ones even before streaming kind of flattened that whole power dynamic. But no, this is a movie where it is cinematic through the performances. Like, Richard Linklater is a director. He's not just a screenwriter who films his own movies. You really see in this film, you know, it's a screenplay he wrote with Glen Powell, I should mention. It's something like Sidney Lumet did so perfectly with 12 Angry Men. Like, all you need are a group of dynamic characters. All you need is that tension. You just need the camera to capture that and let that fill the screen.
Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
So guys, that's it for my thoughts on Hitman and why I think everybody should check this out. Let me know if you have gotten the chance to see this film. Let me know what you think of it. Let me know what you think of Richard Linklater, and if you think Glen Powell could be our generation's Robert Redford or Paul Newman. Until next time, guys, this is That Bad Media, signing out.